I am obsessed with Book of the New Sun. I think it is one of the best speculative fiction books ever written. Maybe one of the best book series, full stop. I would sing its praises for days. I'd sing its praise for days, and I don't want to sit here and tell you how good it is. You can go watch my Should You Read It video and decide if it's for you. Um, though you should just go read it. Go do that. But I'm not going to talk about New Sun right now. I want to talk about the sequel series, Book of the Long Sun. So many people, after like obsessively loving New Sun, it is not uncommon for someone to get to Long Sun and kind of bounce off of it, despite this person potentially like going into the online forums and gushing about how New Sun is the best thing they've ever read and they don't know how it could ever be topped, and it's a new bar, has been set for fiction, blah, 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 blah. And then that same person might come back a month later and be like, lads, I just don't get Long Sun. It is so different. It is not what I was expecting, and it is not what I loved about Wolf. But the people who bounce off of it, they don't see that depth because glaringly, it is not a first-person narrative. The first line of the book is enlightenment came to Peter a Silk on the ball court. Immediately, if you're coming from New Sun, you're like, okay, is this a character talking about somebody else or what's going on here? Very quickly, you learn, no, this is a third-person narrative. And not only is it a third-person narrative, but it jumps perspective. It is what could be perceived as a traditional epic of whatever genre, sci-fi, fantasy. It is like, it's just a big adventure story. And that is not an unfair assessment, but it is a grossly unfair assessment. It's so difficult to talk around this. So I'm going to talk around it for a short period of time, but there will come a point where I'm going to spoil the ever-living fuck out of Long Sun and maybe the best reveal in fiction I have ever experienced. This comes with caveats, and if you are to read Long Sun based on anything I say, the version of Long Sun that you get is important. The Orb Omnibus editions should be avoided. The Orb editions, they're the most readily available, and honestly, they're probably the ones you're going to get unless you go the Kindle route. They're not the ones you should get, unfortunately. Maybe go for the Kindle Guild America version, or if you can find the physical version of the Guild America books, publications of Long Sun, go for them. Because there is a vital typo that ruins one of the best moments in Book of the Long Sun. But we're going to talk about some of the other things that are good about Long Sun before we get to that spoilery section. One of the most interesting parts of Book of the Long Sun is, once again, its protagonist and trying to suss what the fuck is going on with Peter a Silk. For the first 100 pages of being with this character, you're trying to suss out what is his arc going to be? Where does this character go? For the initial part of it, I thought it was for sure going to be a corruption arc. But then as I got farther into it, I began to question that. Did I come back around to thinking it was a corruption arc? Was I right about that? Who knows? But that's where my first thoughts were. But very quickly, I was like, oh, I think this is going somewhere else entirely. And where it goes, oh my god, where it goes. Each book, there's 4 books in Book of the Long Sun, and each one kind of encapsulates a different style of story. Like the first book is very much a heist story, and it has all the themes and tropes that you would expect to find in a heist story, except add a bunch of silk nonsense. And then second and third and fourth book, they're very much their own kinds of stories as well. You got like spy thrillers, you got war. Each book has its own feel to it, but all of them feel Long Sun. The world is fascinating. The characters are interesting. You've got a talking sidekick animal. Please. If you can't handle me at my babbiest, you don't deserve me at my orb. But the nature of the world or whirl of Book of the Long Sun is one of the biggest draws that pulled me through it. Yes, Silk is a fascinating character, but the shape the world takes around Silk was one of the biggest driving forces for me. When it finally clicked what the world was and all of the hints that it had given me up to that point, it does all of the best stuff that Wolf does. Like, you have those Wolfian reveals. You've got the things obscured through complicated prose, obfuscation through complexity. It's his thing. All of that is in there. It's just not as obvious, and it's not wearing it on its sleeve as much because you've experienced that in Book of the New Sun. I imagine it's him saying, or him thinking to himself, they know what to expect now. I've showed my hand. So now I'm going to play my hand a little bit closer to the chest. And I'm going to make you guess a little bit more. And I'm going to keep you in the dark a little bit more. So if you're someone who bounced off of Long Sun, this is the moment I implore you, please go check out Long Sun. Do it. You won't regret it. And it leads into one of the best fucking sequel series ever in the form of Book of the Short Sun. But we're not touching Short Sun right now. But that's your chance, please. If you bounced off Long Sun, go read it. Please give it a chance. You're not going to be disappointed. And to support the fact that the complexity is there, we have to go into spoilers now. This is the title of the video. Wolf is playing his cards so close to his chest, and he is revealing things in such an underhanded and sly way that the editors of the Orb edition of Book of the Long Sun edited out a key reveal because they thought it was a mistake. That something can be read and by the editor and they see it and go, oh, okay, well, obviously it's been this way the whole book up to this point, so that's a mistake, fix. Boom, I've fixed an error. No, you've just ruined one of the best reveals in all of speculative fiction. And I don't blame you, it's okay, but I do blame you, and it's not okay. It's hard to recommend the Orb editions of the books now for that reason. But I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm sorry for stalling for so long. This is your last chance. Go read Book of the Long Sun if you bounced off of it. If you haven't read anything, if everything I've said is complete nonsense to you and you have no idea what I'm talking about, one, how the fuck did you find this video? How did you get here? And two, go read Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. What the fuck are you doing? Go do that right now. Three, go read Book of the Long Sun. That's it. I'm going to spoil now. Book of the Long Sun is told in a third-person narrative. It's pretty close third-person, but it is third-person. It's not a first-person narrative, and we jump perspectives. This is the thing that disappoints a lot of New Sun readers when they go to Long Sun because they're expecting more of the same trickery. In Book of the Long Sun, we're following Silk, who is the Patera priest of the Mantion Church on Sun Street. We don't get a huge amount of the Mantion. We get some of the Materas, the Sibyls, nuns of the church Mantion, and we get a few of the students who study there. One of the students that we get is Horn. He's mentioned on the very, very, very first page of Book of the Long Sun. So he's there from page 1. Cue an entire 4-book epic about Patera Silk's crazy adventure. So you'd be forgiven if you think that there's not that level of complexity in Long Sun because there's this third-person narrative and you want that first-person complexity. Where's all that mad metatextual stuff? The closest thing you get is the dramatist persona, which is giving you the list of places and names, but like that could just be a wolf thing. That's not necessarily contextualized within the world. You don't know if it is or not. It's, you know, it could be, but it's not necessarily. So the whole story happens. Silk is the main character and off he goes, and Horn slips in and out of the narrative sporadically. Very, very late in the series, in the last half of the last book of Book of the Long Sun, there is a moment when Horn bursts into the room in this third-person narrative. Silk is in the middle of talking. In this paragraph that Silk says, it starts with, Silk said. And in this thing that Silk says, he refers to himself as I, because he is saying that in the text of the story. Silk said, then he speaks and he says I. The sentence he is saying is interrupted by Horn bursting into the room. I just don't think I made it clear why I'm pointing that out. Wolf is really calling attention to the structure before the reveal. He says Silk said, and then Silk uses the words I. So you are thinking about, at the very least subconsciously, these things are in your head. The fact that it's a third-person narrative and that Silk has been a character in this third-person narrative and that he's always been referred to as Silk and no one outside of dialogue would ever refer to themselves as I. These things are, at the very least, subconsciously inside your head because of the paragraph immediately preceding this reveal. The sentence is cut off with an em dash. And the next sentence, this is part of the third person narrative. It says, at that moment, I burst into the room. And if you're not paying attention, if the book has made you relax a bit, or the series, and if you're not paying the level of attention that you were paying to New Son, then it might go over your head. But that's Horn revealing to you, the reader, that he is writing this. Horn fucked up. Horn did one of the cardinal sins of writing, and he changed narrative voice. It's like going from past to present tense mid-paragraph or sentence even. He fucked up. Horn is writing the book. It is such a fucking clever and good reveal. Unless you're reading the Kindle edition, which is what I read, or you are reading the America Guild Books, I think it's called, version, you're not going to get that. If you buy the most readily available version of the book, of the text, you're not going to get that reveal, because the editor of this thought that that was a typo on Gene Wolfe's part and fixed it. Because it is so metatextually dense that the level Gene Wolfe is working at was interpreted by an editor as a mistake on Wolfe's part, as opposed to a mistake by Horn, a fictional character who wrote this. Just so you fully grasp what I'm saying here, the editor changed I burst into the room to Horn burst into the room. So instead of it being one of the coolest pages in the book, it's just a sentence that flies by and there's nothing to even miss. And then you get to the brilliant moment at the end where it's confirmed. If you miss that, which you could miss that, especially if you read the Orb edition, you're gonna miss it. You get to the My Defense section at the very end of the book. My Defense. So if you had missed that, the My Defense at the end of the book functions the same way that the translator note functions at the end of the first edition of Book of the New Sun, Shadow of the Torturer. Gene Wolfe is a very good writer, and if I've just spoiled the fuck out of something that you've never read, I'm sorry that you didn't get to experience this yourself. You should have heeded my warnings. But maybe you're one of those people, these weirdos that doesn't get bothered by spoilers, and this might have piqued your interest and gone, wait a minute, that's kind of nuts that happened. And it is kind of nuts, yeah. Check out Book of the Long Sun, if for no other reason than to get to Book of the Short Sun. But that's all I have to say. I needed to talk about this because I've been thinking about Book of the Long Sun a lot lately. It's due a reread. I've only read it twice. But yeah, you need to check out Book of the New Sun. You need to check out Book of the Long Sun. So that's all I had to say about that. I haven't made as many videos here as I wanted because I made one about the Avatar adaptation and it got copyright dinged and that bummed me out, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to do my own creative stuff that won't get copyright dinged. So I've been doing a lot of writing and a lot of working on some other strange stuff, creative projects. So sorry for being absent from here, but I'm not abandoning the channel. I'm still doing stuff here and I'm still going to talk about stuff here. I really want to talk about adaptations. I've been thinking about adaptations a lot. I think there's a lot to say about modern adaptations. Dune, Fallout, Avatar, Last of Us. There's been some very interesting, some very great, some very mid. Lots of stuff to say. I have lots of thoughts about adaptations and how adaptable Gene Wolfe is and Gene Wolfe stories. I really like the Orb editions. That's the shame about this. They're really nice editions of the story.